Nigel Farage's ECHR showdown. When Parliament became a battleground. The House of Commons is supposed to be the pinnacle of British parliamentary democracy, a place where serious legislators debate the future of our nation with dignity and decorum. But what unfolded today when Nigel Farage stood to present his bill on leaving the European Convention on Human Rights was nothing short of extraordinary, and frankly, rather telling about the state of our political class. If you haven't already, do subscribe to UK Connors, because we're cutting through the Westminster noise to bring you the politics that actually matters, the debates that shape your life, and the moments the establishment would rather you didn't see. Picture this: the Reform UK leader, standing in the chamber he fought years to enter, attempting to make what he clearly believes is the argument of his political career, only to be drowned out by heckling that would make a rowdy pub quiz look restrained. The Deputy Speaker had to intervene repeatedly just to maintain basic order, which raises rather an uncomfortable question about who exactly is running Parliament these days. Farage wasn't asking for the moon. He was presenting a 10-minute bill calling for Britain to withdraw from the ECHR, a treaty that has become increasingly controversial as it relates to our borders, our sovereignty, and our ability to actually control who comes into this country. But the Liberal Democrats and various other MPs simply couldn't help themselves, turning what should have been a substantive debate into something resembling a particularly unruly episode of Prime Minister's Questions. At one point, Farage's patience clearly wore thin. "Children, be quiet," he told the chamber. And honestly, can you blame him? When grown men and women elected to represent millions of British citizens behave like playground bullies, someone needs to call it out. This isn't about whether you agree with Farage or not. This is about basic parliamentary standards, about allowing elected members to make their case without being shouted down like they're at a football match. The sneering, the jeering, the constant interruptions, it all speaks to a deeper problem in our political culture, the absolute refusal of certain MPs to engage with arguments they find uncomfortable, preferring instead to mock and dismiss rather than debate and dismantle. Then came the Putin jibe, because of course it did. It's become the go-to smear, hasn't it? Anyone who questions our relationship with European institutions must somehow be in cahoots with Moscow. Farage's response was deliciously cutting. It's marvelous to see the levels of intellectual debate in this place. It really is. The sarcasm was palpable and entirely deserved. When your opponents resort to guilt by association and cheap shots rather than addressing the substance of what you're saying, you know they are struggling. And they were struggling, because Farage was touching on something that resonates far beyond the green benches of Westminster, something that millions of voters across this country have been saying for years: who actually runs Britain? His question to the Liberal Democrats was pointed and powerful. What is wrong with you? Do you not believe this country is good enough to make its own laws? It's a question that cuts right to the heart of the sovereignty debate, the same debate that drove Brexit, the same debate that continues to divide this nation. And it's a question that his opponents singularly failed to answer, choosing instead to shout him down. The irony is almost too rich. Here were MPs, elected to a sovereign parliament, refusing to even entertain the idea that said Parliament should have ultimate authority over British law. You couldn't write it. Farage's central argument was clear and, whether you agree with it or not, perfectly logical within its own framework. Brexit, he argued, cannot be complete whilst we remain subject to a foreign court. The ECHR, signed up to in 1998, now means that even if all 650 MPs wanted to change the rules on channel crossings, they could be overruled by judges in Strasbourg. Judges who, as Farage pointed out, are mostly not even legally qualified in the traditional sense, but are jurists appointed through political process. And here's where it gets interesting, because it's not wrong about the structure. The ECHR isn't some neutral arbiter of justice handed down from on high. It's a political institution created by politicians, staffed through political processes, and operating according to interpretations that have evolved far beyond what the original signatories intended. But it wasn't just about Strasbourg. Farage also took aim at domestic judges who, he claims, now make their own interpretations of what we've understood for centuries to be British common law. This is absolutely crucial to understanding his argument. He is not just railing against foreign interference. He is questioning the entire modern framework of human rights law that has, in his view, supplanted the ancient traditions of British liberty with state-given rights that can be interpreted, expanded, and applied by an unelected judiciary. Whether you think this is a dangerous rollback of protections or necessary restoration of parliamentary sovereignty probably depends on where you sit politically, but you cannot deny it's a serious argument that deserves serious engagement. The vision Farage laid out was remarkably traditionalist, almost romantic in its evocation of British history. Birthrights, liberty, freedom, concepts that over centuries serve our country, in his words, far better than any other nation on the European continent. It's a narrative that appeals deeply to a certain strand of British political thought, this idea that we had it right before we started copying continental models, that our common law tradition was something precious that we've carelessly traded away for fashionable European human rights frameworks. And paired with the immediate, tangible issue of small boats crossing the channel, an issue that the ECHR has been widely blamed for exacerbating, Farage was offering not just... The bill itself had no chance, of course. MPs voted it down by 154 to 96, which tells its own story. 9 to 6 MPs, not an insignificant number, voted to leave the ECHR. That's 9 to 6 elected representatives who believe, like Farage, that the current arrangement is untenable. But 154 disagreed, and the bill fell. What's fascinating isn't so much the result, which was entirely predictable, but the manner of the debate. The fact that Farage couldn't get through a 10-minute speech without constant interruption, the fact that substantive points about sovereignty and legal frameworks were met with Putin references enduring, the fact that the deputy speaker had to repeatedly call for order, all of this reveals something rather uncomfortable about the state of British political discourse. Because here's the thing that makes this more than just another Westminster row. The issues Farage raised aren't going away. The small boats crisis continues unabated. Deportation flights get grounded at the last minute because of ECHR interventions. British voters watch as a government, which they elected with a mandate to control borders, finds itself unable to implement policies because of legal frameworks they never voted for and can't change. You might think leaving the ECHR is a terrible idea. You might believe it would damage Britain's international standing and undermine human rights protections, and those are legitimate concerns. But pretending the sovereignty question doesn't exist, or that it's somehow illegitimate to even raise it, is intellectually dishonest and politically foolish. What today's Commons chaos revealed is that Westminster still hasn't come to terms with what Brexit actually meant. It wasn't just about trade deals and regulatory alignment. It was a fundamental challenge to the post-war consensus about pooled sovereignty, international institutions, and the supremacy of domestic parliamentary democracy. The ECHR predates the EU, yes, but it's part of the same basic framework, the same philosophy that says national parliaments should be constrained by international legal obligations. Farage's bill, doomed though it was, forced MPs to confront that philosophy head-on, and rather than engage with it seriously, many chose to sneer and interrupt. That's not democracy functioning well. That's democracy avoiding difficult conversations. The voting figures deserve closer scrutiny too. 9 to 6 MPs backed Farage's bill, which means support for leaving the ECHR is far from negligible in Parliament. Reform UK obviously voted for it, but there were likely some Conservative MPs in that number as well, perhaps emboldened by their time in opposition or genuinely convinced by the sovereignty argument. Meanwhile, the 154 who voted against included Labour, the Liberal Democrats, and various other parties who clearly believe the ECHR is worth preserving. This is a new dividing line in British politics, not left versus right in the traditional sense, but internationalists versus sovereigntists, those who trust supranational institutions versus those who want Westminster supreme. MPs voted it down. Farage's bill won't become law, and the ECHR remains in place. But the debate isn't over. Not by a long shot. The issues he raised, sovereignty, borders, the role of judges, parliamentary supremacy, these will continue to dominate British politics for years to come. And the manner of today's debate, the heckling, the interruptions, the refusal to engage seriously, suggests that Westminster still hasn't figured out how to have these conversations in a way that serves the country or respects the voters who sent them there. Whether you're with Farage or against him, you should want better than what happened today. You should want MPs who can debate serious issues seriously, who can disagree without descending into pantomime, who can treat opposing views with respect even as they argue against them. Stay with UK Connors for the politics that matters, the debates that shape your Britain, and the analysis that goes beyond the headlines. Because Westminster might be chaotic, but our coverage never will be.